Hello everyone. My name is Sammy. I had the pleasure a couple years ago learning under uh Danny. Weird calling him Danny now. It used to be Professor Shaw, but now it's just Uncle Danny, as he wants me to refer to him now. Um, so I'm a first generation Palestinian. My parents grew up in Palestine. They raised me and my siblings here, and they raised us as well as any Palestinian parent can, especially given our history as a people. They instilled the love for Palestine with all three of my siblings from the very early ages in life. So when we see things like what's going on now, what's going on in Palestine, even before, prior, it hits a deeper level as Palestinians in America because we're not physically there, but we're feeling the pain of over a million plus people a day. So I'm also in my last year at law school at the CUNY School of Law. And the history of CUNY Law has prided itself as an institution with being very law school for the service of human needs, but the past couple days or like the past 2 years has begun to show its true colors as a school. It's a social justice school with an asterisk on it, the asterisk being the stance on Palestine. And the CUNY as a whole has now had an asterisk as the whole Palestinian conversation in general. So being being Palestinian and going to CUNY, especially because it's a school of predominantly of people of color, having now to deal with some sort of censorship from a school that boasts about being very diverse is sort of a slap in the face and continuously fuels the anger of not just Palestinian, but like anyone who supports Palestine, any Muslim that's there, any Arab that's there, because a lot of these, uh, today our demonstration was to call out our dean and our chancellor at CUNY because the statement he had produced was probably the most Islamophobic, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian statement you can get from a chancellor. So the anger has surpassed words these days. Like it's mind-boggling how, you know, it is being in a situation like this, and especially with the whole PR war that goes on. It's mind-boggling. I have to us as Palestinians, it's like we have to explain why killing us is bad. Like we have to explain to people what it mean that we are human beings. We're not just a statistic. We're not just a number. We're not this Orientalist lens that they put on Palestinians that is Islamophobic and anti-Arab in general. The community has, as a whole, from what I understand and from what I feel, we're all tired and we're all very angry with the way things get covered, and especially when it comes to Palestinian resistance and that sort of thing.
You want to tell them about some of the organizations within our lifetime and other organizations you work with?
Yeah, sure. So, for my for 3 years in undergrad, I was on the board for Students for Justice in Palestine at John. And then the as people had moved on from undergrad, they wanted to continue organizing for Palestine on a bigger level, not just something at school, but something along the lines of outside for the community, especially for like the Palestinian community in New York. So some organizations that are doing and continuing this work is beyond the scope of Students for Justice in Palestine, because we're no longer students. We are now active members in this world. So one organization that I would highly recommend, or the work that they do and applaud the work that they do, is Within Our Lifetime for Palestine. So the name comes from, we Palestine will be free within our lifetime. So they call themselves Within Our Lifetime, to put the slogan out there and to continue knowing that the downfall of the occupation is coming. And that's one of the orgs that's worth mentioning. There's also the Palestinian Youth Movement, which is across the U.S. Within Our Lifetime is more focused in New York, but Palestinian Youth, the PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement, is across, has chapters across the U.S. And I have a friend that works with PYM up in Canada, and if we thought censorship was bad here, certain Palestinian content doesn't even get published or seen in Canada. One of my friends in Canada has to hit me up and ask me, "Yo, during the first week of the escalation, he was hitting me up. He was asking me like, "Yo, what did you post on your story?" Because an Instagram page known as Eye on Palestine, which is very up to date. It gets its content every second it comes out. Something's happening. It gets it. Canada's government as a whole has sort of banned people from seeing it, and you can't see it and you can't access it because of Canada. There's also a group in New York called Al Auda, the Right to Return. Um, there are a lot of other CUNY wide SJPs, but obviously those they're doing work on campuses instead of outside organizing. So for New York and those who are within New York or visiting New York or want to know about organizations that are doing Palestine work in New York, definitely would want to check in with Within Our Lifetime for Palestine. They're the ones who also called out the Zionist councilwoman that showed up to a pro-Palestine rally with a gun. Um, and Al Auda, they're doing amazing work, and Palestinian Youth Movement are all orgs outside of the university sense that are organizing for Palestine.
Thank you very much, Danny, or Sammy. I'm sorry. If you have links to the websites of any of these organizations, could you post them for
We posted them.
everybody in the chat? Oh, okay, great, 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 great. So you mentioned a few things in there that I'd like to just talk about for a moment. You mentioned the censorship in media. Um, I don't think I have to tell anyone here how horrible censorship is in the West right now. A good friend of ours who works with Revolutionary Blackout Network was just completely demonetized because of coverage of Palestine that was not pro-Zionist. I don't know what y'all's opinions of him are. I mean, whatever. I disagree with him on many things, but he's telling the truth about Palestine. Jackson Hinkle was recently booted off of YouTube for doing that. He said a whole bunch of other stuff. It was fine. Touch this, and you get booted off of YouTube. And that's a problem. And so one of the solutions I think we need to constantly be thinking of is how we fight a media war when we are so outgunned. Right? That's a big deal. They control the narrative, so they control hearts and minds. Guarantee you, if they didn't have that media apparatus, there wouldn't be a single goddamn Zionist in this country. If we could get the truth out in a more effective manner than they get out the lies, there would be no Zionists left, because nobody is just okay. Well, outside of a few wackadoos, nobody is okay with genocide. Nobody is okay with the things the Israeli state suffers upon the Palestinian people. Nobody's okay with that. And there will be a larger fight. So that's something I want us all to think about. I also want to center this in a more localized direction, right? One of the things that Danny and I are both very passionate on is making sure our bodies are as healthy as our minds, right? And for us, that means staying away from drugs, right? Now, I was an addict for a long time. I'm 16 years clean now. And I do that because of a support network. Because of this issue, though, many of those support networks have broken down. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he can't even go to his 12-step meetings because the Zionists there won't allow him to talk about what is triggering him to want to use. And that is a problem when they let it interfere with your personal health like that, right? But they have no shame. They're going to keep doing it. That's just a personal thing for me. So that's another thing I want to talk about in this meeting is how we can affect things on a local level to, I don't like the word safe space or any of that stuff. It's too collegey for me. But what I want to do is create an unsafe space for Zionists within these healthy sorts of organizations. Making sure we can control an atmosphere within a group that cannot let that stuff in, make it unsafe for that sort of thing, because that's important for people's mental health. It just is. But before we get into any of that, I want to, we'd like to sort of go through and everybody introduce yourselves. In every class, we spend a lot of the first one just talking about who we are and how we got to where we are right now. So if someone wants to kick us off with that, why don't you raise your hand and then pass it to somebody else?
Well, Noah, can I just clarify? Is it cool if we just say our names and our relationship to the Palestinian liberation struggle? Because if we start listing our movement accolades, I think, a minute each, 30 to 60 seconds, your name and how long you've been studying about Palestine, defending Palestine, whatever your relationship to Palestine.
That's a great idea. And actually, Danny direct messaged me that 1 minute thing, and I forgot to mention it. So I apologize. That's on me. I'll start though. I've been a communist my whole life, and still don't know enough about Palestine. And so I am here to learn and help in whatever way I can. And I'll pass it to Sam Dixon from there.
Hey everybody, I'm Sam Dixon. I was sent by my college in the summer of 2019 to an international gathering of our universities. I'm part of the Lasallian University system. And we gathered in France, and I met someone from Palestine because we have a school in Bethlehem, Palestine. There were supposed to be two students. Only one made it because of the amount of checkpoints that they had to go through. So I was able to hear for the first time. They spoke for about an hour. They set aside time just for them to speak to us about Palestine. So I just heard it, straight from the heart, for straight up from them. So ever since 2019, I've been caring about this issue deeply, and I've been able to contact them. They're doing okay. They just completed a university course in Germany, and I've been in Palestine ever since. But yeah, so I just care a lot about this issue, and I love what I've been able to do with Midwestern life. So happy to be here.
You want to pass it to someone else, Sam?
Sure. Daniel is next to me on the screen, so I'll just start to him.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Daniel Gutierrez. I've been involved, with the sort of the Palestinian liberation struggle, maybe since, gosh, I don't know, maybe like 2018-ish or so. I think right around the time of the March of Return, there was a lot of actions, and I got involved then. It's very few issues move me more than this issue. I think it's of like fundamental importance to the anti-imperial struggle. And yeah, I also have a lot to learn. I've learned a lot, actually. We covered the history of the Palestinian struggle and kind of like the history of the colonization of Palestine and some of the major figures and historical moments in that struggle recently in our Reform versus Revolution class. But I'm excited to learn this issue like on a more deeper level. I think that we really need to be able to talk about this issue and explain it to people in terms that they can understand, because there's so much propaganda, and there's just very little access to information in the media. So I'm gonna pass it over to Ariana.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ariana. I'm from Argentina, and I've always been a leftist, and in my struggle against capitalism and imperialism, I found out about Palestine in about 2014, and since then I've been educating myself and speaking up about the issue. In fact, I work at Apple, and right now speaking of shadow banning and stuff like that, my office is silencing me in very obvious ways. One of them is not letting me come back to the office. So I'm working from home right now for speaking up about all these issues. So yeah, that's my story. I'm going to pass it to Herb.
Hello. My name's Ervil. I have evolved my politics and perspective of leftist theory and issues over the last few years. I first got involved in 2016, and since then have been learning more and more. I got involved through climate activism, and since then I've come to realize how capitalism, imperialism, and all of these other global issues are all intersectional in the fight for justice. I got introduced to Danny through like a book club we did on a CIA coup overthrowing the democratically elected president of Iran. And since then, I've been learning more and more from him. Relating to Palestine, I've become aware of, the oppression that they've been facing in 2020. And since then, I've been doing the work to learn more about this issue, and I'm here so that I can continue to learn more and learn how to be supporting the struggle for freedom. So I will pass it to, let's see, who else? Anna?
Hi, Anna Roy. I can't remember when I first learned of this issue, I think in college, and I just think it's so important. And I guess two things that stand out. Well, just talking about activists, American activist Rachel Corrie, who was killed by an Israeli IDF tank, I think in Rafah? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then Tristan Anderson here in the Bay Area. I live in Oakland. I was familiar with his work. He was shot in the eyeball by the IDF with a projectile and has brain damage. And I met his girlfriend out at some, merch here in the Bay Area. And then just more recent return from Nicaragua with Friends of ATC. And I guess, I've been involved with Occupy, Black Lives Matter. I would consider myself a leftist. And I just think it's so important we continue to get the word out about this and organize and push and go to all the marches and do everything we can. I'm a little sad that I don't see anything here in Oakland. I know right now in San Francisco there's an action, and I got an alert about it, but I feel like I'm disheartened about that. But I know there's an outpouring of support right now for Palestine, I think. And so I just think it's, maybe it's not getting attention, but I do feel like there's a shift. I hope that's about it. Thank you.
Do you want to pass to someone else?
Yes, next, Kaylin.
Thanks, friend. Hi, I'm Kaylin. My leftist journey has gone from I was kind of vaguely left for most of my life. I sort of came into political consciousness when I joined the Navy. I was in for a year. This was in 2016, so the Bernie campaign was going on. Around the same time, Joey Badass dropped an album, All American Badass, which kind of radicalized me a little bit. After that, I got out of the Navy after a year. So I started my journey in animal welfare, working in animal shelters. And yeah, something that really radicalized me was how white women in particular will sooner say that animals deserve veterinary care, a place to live, food, before they'll say that people deserve those things. So that really, it kind of clicked something in my mind. I had communist friends, which led to me learning about Palestine. And that was in like 2018, 2019, which also kind of radicalized me.
Thank you for that. Is it Kaylin? Do you want to pass to someone else?
Yeah, I'll pass it to Andres.
Hey everybody. I don't know what to say. I feel I know all of you guys. We were in the class last week. But yeah, I've always been a bit of a leftist. I don't know anything about Palestine until now. I used to be very ignorant. I really wanna learn. So I took this course and I shared it with some of my friends, and I know they're here. So I'm gonna pass it over to my friend and Sol.
Hey everybody. I'm Sol. I'm from Costa Rica too. And I've been very recently getting more involved and just trying my best to sort of educate myself and learn more about this outside of mainstream media. So that's why this was recommended to me by Andres. But I'm really looking forward to it. And I'll pass this to Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan in New Jersey. I'm 73 and I first started becoming an activist in my teens, but became more radicalized, I'd say about 1980. And I've been a long time, decades and decades activist for both human rights and animal rights. And I concentrate on the connections between all social justice movements. And I guess I started focusing on Palestine maybe about 10 years ago. I'm Jewish, well, an atheist Jew. So I feel it's incumbent upon me to speak out for Palestine, since this genocide is ostensibly being perpetrated in my name. So I feel I really need to speak out. That's about it. I will shift over to my friend Jose, who told me about this, and that's how I signed up.
Thank you, Susan. Before you go, Jose, I want to say one real quick thing about us chosen people, Susan. I've always found the association with Zionism and Judaism strange. My family's never been religious. We always joke that we're Jewish, right? We're ethnically Jewish, but not religious or even cultural. Anyway, not the point. Talmudic law forbids people taking it upon themselves to create this homeland.
Yes.
That's Talmudic law, not just, Noah being a jerk to Israelis, right? So there are Jewish groups specifically who talk about this as Zionists do this taking it upon themselves to do the work that is meant for the Messiah. They're releasing their Judaism. That's how they see it anyway. And so I think more people who are Jewish need to stand up and say that kind of thing and say we stand with humanity and not genocide. Thank you.
I see them at events, Naturi Karta, that they believe that Jews need to be a diasporic people, not have a homeland. And along those lines, one thing as a Jew I stress is that Zionism is actually anti-Semitic, because what could possibly be more anti-Semitic than conflating a fascist political philosophy with an entire religion? And my T-shirt, which you can't really see, says something along those lines. So that's the message.
We want to see it. We want to see it. Can you show it to us?
Love it, sister.
Actually, I'm trying to remember which T-shirt I have on now. This one doesn't make the anti-Semitic message, but I do have ones that do.
I want that. I want a T-shirt like that so badly. That's awesome.
Well, I go to Cafe Press and I just have my own T-shirts made up with my slogans.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. I'm sorry we were sort of going up on a side note there. Go ahead, Jose. I think you passed it to.
Yes.
Yes, no need to apologize. It was a good conversation. Hello, everyone. I'm Jose from Jersey City. And I became politicized in a way that I try not to spend as much energy on anymore, but I became politicized through the electoral process, through Ralph Nader's 2000 campaign. And as part of that, that's when I first learned of Palestine. So I've been sort of trying to keep Palestine on my radar, for the last 23 years or so. Basically because I try to center my activism really in opposition to U.S. imperialism and colonialism and all of that, which I think is, really connects with this issue. So yeah, I'm just glad to be a part of this class because I feel like I definitely have a lot more to learn on this issue. And yeah, just happy to be here now. Pass it on to... I'll pass it to Ruby.
Ruby says, I'm on a computer without a mic or camera. I'm Ruby and I'm interested in learning more about Palestine and its struggle. I'm a documentary filmmaker and activist, and I am deeply interested in social justice issues and movements. And Ruby is passing it on to Sariyashi. I don't know if Sariyashi can hear us.
Well, Sariyashi gets ready here. Can I ask a question? Does anyone know how I can make the chat automatically scroll down? I keep missing everything.
Maybe if you take the...
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I don't know the Zoom app very well. I apologize. Go ahead. Was it
Sariyashi?
Yeah.
Hello all. I'm so sorry, 1 second. Yeah. I came to know about the Palestine issue in 2010-11 onwards. I'm from a Marxist background. My parents were in Marxist movement all along. And I am from India, so I kind of have a very different, I grew up in a very different background than, I guess, others. So we had, where I am from, we had a communist government for 30 years and it had a few drawbacks, because of which it had gone to, the power has gone to a reactionary government. So our generation actually had a disillusionment. And then what we saw with the reactionary government is horrific. And so I kind of, although Palestinian movement was very different from all this, so I kind of came back to the Marxist movement after 2014 when Modi government came to power. And Palestinian movement was all along one of the key central issues in all across the leftist radar, which are like very diverse in Indian context. But Palestinian issue was very central because it's about self-determination. And even in reactionary background, like the present Modi government, what it represents, the party leaders also previous party leaders also stood by the Palestinian cause. So in context of India, Palestinian cause was always from across the radar in favor of Palestine. And that's about it. And I'm not sure who I can pass it on to. Zena.
Hi, everyone. I hear that a lot of you guys know each other, and that's actually really cool. I am a Palestinian. I'm from Indiana now. I used to live in Michigan. And I grew up going to the rallies and going to Palestine, actually. So I've experienced a lot of like the apartheid, which until recently, I never really thought of it that way. It was just like my experience as a Palestinian. And so I think I realized also recently, obviously due to what's been happening, that like I need to be an informed advocate, if that makes sense. Like it's not enough to just share firsthand experience, right? So you need to be informed about the history and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm also like, this feels like a crowd and I'm very like anxious right now. Sorry about that. Thank you guys.
No problem, sister. Take your time.
Thank you. So, oh, sorry. I just want to mention also, I think it's also so important to be informed because we're spreading the message of like the Palestinian liberation. And so you can't be like posting misinformation, disinformation. That's what they do. That's not what we do, right? That's not what we should be doing. And so especially like my family over there, when this first started going, like this past week, everything that's happened, I was very surprised to see that my family over there wasn't posting, the ones that live in the West Bank. Thankfully, no one's in Gaza, which is like a blessing, but of course it's tragic still. And so they can't post because they're under fear of like imprisonment and fines and stuff like that. So I realized we over here, we're their voice. They can't speak for themselves, so we speak for them and we share their message. So I just, we need to be well informed about the history and what's going on and how we can be better advocates for them. And I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you guys. I'm excited to learn.
Thank you, sister. Is there someone you want to pass it to? Oh, Danny, did I interrupt you?
Is there anyone else who hasn't introduced themselves? Pete, Steph, Julie, Wessam. Go ahead, Wessam.
Hi, yeah, I'm Wissam. I'm based in Canada. I first learned about Palestine when I was a kid. Sort of common Arab experience. I think my mom was Lebanese, or she is Lebanese, and she had to flee from Lebanon to Canada during the Civil War because of the Christian militias terrorizing the Muslim population there with the backing of Israel. So I've known about Palestine for a long time. I've been an active activist in solidarity with Palestine for about 15 years. I visited Palestine in 2013. Now I'm active with local organizations. I'm in the Communist Party of Canada and also a local group called Justice for Palestinians. And I also write a bi-monthly article on Palestine for a British activist newspaper called Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism. And I'll pass it on to who hasn't gone. I guess Lena. Has Lena gone?
No, I haven't gone yet. Hello, everyone. My name is Lena. I'm also first generation Palestinian. And I actually saw that this class was being offered a couple hours ago, and I wanted more educational resources and information, especially because I have a lot of people asking me questions and I don't want to feed them false information. So I felt like this class would help me a lot. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena. Has anyone else not gone? What about Brian? I'm not. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Montez. I've always been left-leaning, but really it wasn't until taking a couple courses at CUNY, at Queens College, where I learned about the history of Africa that completely sold me on liberation movements around the world. Learning about the Congo and Lumumba, Angola, Mozambique, just to name a few, just opened my eyes. And now that I'm a high school teacher, I feel like it's incumbent on me to pass that information on and, give a voice to the oppressed around the world. So I'm eager to learn more and hopefully, you know, really thankful to Midwestern Marx. Really excited to see Noah's here. I learned a lot from Eddie, Carlos, and yeah, super stoked to hopefully spread this information on.
Is everyone else? Anyone else? Did we miss anybody?
Sorry, I was a bit late, but I'm from Australia, so called Australia, here in Nam, and I'm just primarily a student, just listening and learning, and yeah.
Thanks a lot, Gab. Is there anyone else, or is that everybody? PFT staff went?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's me, Anna. Sorry, I'm driving home, so I'm switching.
Okay, I always get confused. Perfect. All right, thank you, everybody, and welcome again. My name is Danny Shaw. I started learning about Palestine in the 1990s. The centrality of Palestine to every anti-colonial and anti-imperialist struggle. No matter where I've lived, I've put a Palestinian flag in front of my home. And no matter where I've lived in the United States, well, mostly here in New York City, they have ripped that flag from in front of my home or apartment. And I then put it up the next day. Then they, at some point, stole the flagpoles as well. So part of what we want to explore is why all of this animosity for the past 75 years towards Palestine and the Palestinian right to return and the Palestinian right to self-determination. I want to just go over the agenda that we brainstormed at Midwestern Marx Institute for tonight. I know probably 2/3 of you, because as some of the sisters and brothers mentioned, we just finished an 8-week course called Reform or Revolution, a Marxist view of revolutions past. And our 8th session was supposed to be about 1968 and 1969, the United States on the verge of revolution, looking at the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, the original Rainbow Coalition led by Fred Hampton, the Young Lords, the American Indian Movement. But when things intensified in the occupied territories, we immediately pivoted last Thursday in our final class to Palestinian history, Palestinian reality. So this is for some sort of continuation. The introductions were important because, as you can hear, some of our Palestinian sisters and brothers don't necessarily need this history, or maybe they were born in the US and they do. Some of the anti-Zionist Jewish sisters and brothers probably know the history better than any of us. So it's going to be a collective approach as well. All the books, all the anti-Zionist books, all the research, you guys should be excited. All the books are stacked up and ready to go. You know, I do want to say from the jump, this course is going to be somewhat flexible. And what I mean by maximum flexibility in the class struggle is this is a very, very dire moment in Palestinian history. In fact, I would say the most dire that I've ever seen since 1948, the original Al-Nakba, Arabic for the catastrophe, when the United Nations, the British Empire, and the burgeoning US empire recognized and created and invented this quote unquote Jewish Zionist state that we know well, that the mainstream corporate media calls Israel, that the Palestinian comrades refer to as 48, as in 1948, the year that they were violently displaced, forced out of their land into exile, many into Lebanon, many into the occupied territories, many into Syria. So just to talk about the meeting agenda, this is your class, this is the people's class, this is the Palestinian people's class, and all anti-Zionist class. There's a number of things that we can do. I'm going to give a political overview in a few minutes, but in terms of the agenda, we have a self-care component that a young sister named Isabel is going to come on and lead. But that could be 5 minutes, that could be transitioning from section to section, or that could be like an hour of us doing the meditation and the reflection, and or we could leave that until the end, as at least on the East Coast, what would happen with our classes in the 8-week series, 8 to 10 was very formal, study oriented. And then once we hit 10:02, forget about it. It was just building. No one's on mute. We learn from one another, as many questions as people have. So we have the rigorous historical study component of Palestinian history and Palestinian reality today. We have the self-care component. And most importantly, because of the urgency of the moment, we can also dedicate ourselves to organizing, brainstorming, organizing. So I think those are the three main sections. So just keep that in the back of your mind for when I finish the political overview. Now, we advertise this as a strict class, and that is fine. I only say all of this because today is day 13 of an all-out, if we use the adjective genocidal violence, we don't use it as hyperbole. We're talking about 2.4 million human beings, 1.1 million of whom are children, trapped in the Gaza Strip. It's a ghetto. It's a ghetto twice as big as Boston. If you've ever been to Boston, Boston is tiny. It's 25 by 5 miles. If you were to listen to the Zionist media, both in 48 as well as here in Empire, and right now the British Prime Minister is there, you would think that Gaza was about the size of the United States of America. You would think that Gaza was the biggest threat to peace on earth. The media war, the lies, the propaganda go hand in hand with U.S. and Israeli militarism. So that's why I just mentioned the organizing piece. Shout out again to our anti-Zionist Jewish sisters and brothers who are really right now leading the protests in the civil disobedience, shoulder to shoulder, with Palestinian families and leaders across this country. That is going to intensify in the upcoming days. We'll be at City Hall tomorrow at 1 p.m. Of course, the NYPD will put us into their holding pens as usual, but I expect thousands upon thousands. And on Saturday, we'll be visiting Sammy's neighborhood, Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, the second largest Palestinian and Arab community in the entire United States. What's number one in terms of population? Where's the biggest Arab community in the U.S.? Who wants to? Yeah, Daniel said it there in the chat. Dearborn and Detroit, Michigan. So I'm going to give this political overview, and then collectively, let's hear a few ideas exactly where you all want to move, and of course, any questions. So if someone before Sam asks his question, if someone can just keep time and let me know when I hit 15 minutes with the political overview. Go ahead, Sam.
I just had a quick question about how is it that Dearborn became the most concentrated, and second, what was it, Bay Ridge is the second? How did those two become such large communities?
I can respond unless someone has more expertise. Certainly the automobile industry in the Detroit, Michigan area. I think also too, just sometimes these things are a bit inexplicable, but once some family members start to set up, that becomes the community. I don't know the specificities. I mean, Bay Ridge was old school Italian and Irish. And well, how do I know that? Because every time we march for Palestine, they come out of their bars and curse us out. If not worse, but we often outnumber them tens of thousands to one. So
Danny, I can add a little bit of clarity here. It was largely the immigration from resulting in the end of World War II and lines being redrawn and 48, coinciding with the Great Migration, right? So that like we in the Midwest, Detroit, Chicago, and Cleveland got huge waves of working class people, and it's what turned them into the cities they became before they became what they are now, which is, you know, rusted out, basically inner cities. Well, except for Chicago, I guess, which got sort of corporatized. But yeah, it was like a few things adding into one.
Yeah. Cool. And thanks for putting those books in the chat. Some of my favorite books that we'll get to. So
I'm a scholar.
Where are we at right now? What can we try to anticipate in the upcoming days? There can be no question that the US's decision, right? They've been using Zionism since 1948. I mean, the foresight of the imperialists, of the Balfours and the Lord Chamberlains and these individuals, even before World War II, they foresaw that the Arab world, that the Muslim world could present a lot of stubborn nationalism. And they foresaw that if they could resort back to their classic colonial tactics of divide and conquer, if they could plant this Zionist state smack dab in the middle of this world, one of the richest areas of the world, of course, in terms of oil and natural gas, that the imperial foresight, the imperial thinking was that they could use this battering ram. They could use this extension of Western imperialism whenever it was necessary. So that's what you're seeing play out today. In many ways, it's highly predictable. Now, there's been a lot of polemicizing back and forth about whether the Mossad and the Western intelligence agencies knew that these youth from Hamas, and I say youth because many of these young people were orphaned by IDF snipers and Zionist settlers. They've been orphaned by the Zionist wars on Lebanon, and there's been a series of Zionist wars on Gaza, which of course they call the Gaza wars, as if the Palestinians were the aggressor. And that point there is called language liberation. We can never say the Vietnam War. It was a U.S. imperial war against the Vietnamese people. Always go by what the locals say about the war, because it's the locals who are defending their land, their ancestors, their dignity, and ultimately their self-determination. And that's why for anybody who's thinking, anybody who's critical, anybody who's had access to any of this history, how can you not be on the side of the Lakota people, the Cherokee people, the Palestinian people, the Sioux people, the Wampanoag people? So when people come at you with this, this history is so complicated. What could be simpler? This is not a Jewish question. This is not a Muslim question. This is a question of Zionism. This is a question of white supremacy. I know some of y'all could define Zionism, off the top of your head. You've dedicated your lives to being anti-Zionist. But someone who's maybe more newer to these struggles, do you want to make an attempt at defining Zionism?
I can go for it. Zionism is the middle class action from ruling class direction in the creation of a state for the disparate Jewish people, right? And if you listen to Zionists, it is in protection against the Holocaust, right? The slogan it was founded upon was never again. That was a good slogan. And it's a good idea. And in fact, the Soviets had a similar idea. And there were a couple different autonomous Jewish zones within the Soviet Union. But this is where class enters the picture, right? Because Israel is not Azerbaijan's autonomous Jewish zone in the Soviet Union. It exists with a different class character. It exists for different reasons, and it fulfills different functions. It serves different interests. As Danny explained before, the main point of Israel is a buffer and defense of imperialism, which has become almost supranational in our era with these giant oil cartels, right? And financial institutions. It puts it smack dab in the middle of oil country. And that was what was important. Maintaining dollar and oil hegemony for these businesses. The state apparatuses serve those interests. And that, therefore, is the essence of Zionism. It's oil banking.
Yeah, Zionism, the belief that this quote unquote chosen people have inalienable rights to this holy land exclusively. And that's why over the course now of decades and decades, there's been this concept of birthright. Anyone who can prove any ounce of Jewish heritage. I don't know, perhaps Susan can clarify. I don't know if it's one Jewish parent or one Jewish grandparent, or because the family legend, I've never been able to prove this, but my family says that our great-grandmother, I barely even knew my grandmother on that side, but our great-grandmother was a Jewish Bolshevik forced into exile into Finland, where my grandmother was from. That's part of the family lore. I haven't been able to disprove or approve it, but just saying that, I could apply for birthright in 48 according to Zionist ideology, and then I could go there and claim land and become a settler. And because for Zionism, it's always been a population war too. So it's nefarious in multifaceted ways, these attacks, this siege, this starvation campaign, this dehydration campaign. I mean, at what point the United Nations has been using the word genocide, a genocidal campaign of violence. In my entire life as an anti-imperialist, as an organizer, I've never went through what I've went through in the past 13 days. In terms of righteous indignation, fear, the onslaught of violence, the asymmetrical warfare, at no moment, again, go back to Western media. They call it the Israel Hamas war. That's ridiculous. And what we see is the equating of a people, of a nation, of an indigenous people with terrorism. So today in France, even though it's illegal now to have well, in many countries of Europe, it's illegal to have the Palestinian flag. They've equated it with terrorism. You can no longer wear keffiyehs in Germany, in schools or public places. I'm 45 years old. Started doing this in 1994. I've never seen a moment where fascism has been so sharp in our faces. In the good old days, I say that somewhat sarcastically, but many of you all remember on social media in the good old days, if you ever defended Palestine, you would be attacked and they would say horrible things to you and they would threaten you. With the new algorithms and the shadow banning and the censorship, I mean, have we reached in the first week of this siege, of this genocidal campaign, or potentially genocidal, or looming genocidal campaign of violence, could we reach one liberal on social media? I mean, I don't know if they now turned it back on, because I've been getting harassed much more the past 24 to 48 hours on social media. And that's one thing that potentially we can pick up in this meeting if we choose. Some of the legal strategies. Our lawyer comrades weren't able to join us, but that's something we can table for next Tuesday, Thursday, or the following Tuesday. We set this up as a 4-part series. Some of the potential scenarios that I see playing out. Why would the US and their Zionist underlings carry out something so barbaric, which we cannot see? In Israel, in 48, they can't see it. And in the United States and in the quote unquote Western world, we can't see it. But guess what? In Egypt, they can. In Lebanon, they can. In Iran, they can. And across the third world, specifically in the Muslim world, they can see exactly what's going on. So one can only interpret such a provocative genocidal level of violence as an attempt to draw potentially Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon and across Lebanon into a war, as well as the Iranians. The Iranians said, well, let's go to Iranian news. What are the Iranians saying? And that's part of the, part of the lessons, right? Media literacy. I got so many windows open here. Just have some patience. Where are the Iranians? There they are. Iran, regional situation resembles powder keg ready to explode. So this is Press TV. The U.S. has banned this station many times, and the FBI has seized it many times. I've been doing reporting with the Iranians for about 9 years now. Hispan TV is the Spanish language news source of Iran, and it reaches millions and millions of leftists and others across South America in Spanish. Press TV has been banned and seized so many times, it almost has ceased to exist in the quote unquote West. So Hezbollah will probably open up a second front in the upcoming days. Do the Zionists want a ground war in both Gaza and in the north against Hezbollah? That would be a lot of IDF soldiers coming home in body bags, and that'll begin to turn a big part of the Israeli public, unfortunately, the vast majority of whom, if not, I can't say 100%, but it's a Zionist public. Right now, there's a 90 to 92%, 90 to 92%, it sounds awkward repeating too, percentage of Israelis polled support everything that's happening in Gaza, only because of what Noah referred to, the media war, the informational war. Because no human being who sees what I see and what most of you all see, because if you weren't seeing the other side, the truth is always on the side of the colonized. The truth is always on the side of the oppressed. You wouldn't be here today inquiring and giving of your time and your precious energy to help defend and liberate Palestine. I've never seen a moment this fascist, as I was saying. In Germany, they have outlawed, how ironic, the very zenith of capitalism, Hitlerism that carried out this mass execution, the Holocaust, was the crystallization of how many anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish pogroms. Now, of course, none of those were ever committed by an Arab person or a Muslim person or a Palestinian person. So why do they have to pay the price for Europe's crises, capitalist crises, colonial?
You forget that Bibi said that an Arab was the one that convinced Hitler to do something with the Jews in Germany. So don't forget that.
Wild. I appreciate your sarcasm, Zena. It's wild. Yeah, they try to say that the Mufti of Palestine at the time had a meeting. I don't know. The Zionist mythology. And that's why they'll never. Cornel West debated Alan Dershowitz and ate him alive on Fox News last night. That's why the Zionists will never debate us, because you can't debate. You can't debate books with 1,000 pages of true historiography.
Let me interrupt you real quick, Danny. How do you still call yourself a Jew after allowing Adolf Hitler to go blameless for the Holocaust, who was writing and writing and writing crazy shit about us in everything he wrote? Right? There's to try to get Hitler off the hook is wild. And even our politicals know that Netanyahu is what do they refer to him as, right? A manipulative fanatic. And that's what he is. That's what they say about him behind closed doors. They know very well what the government of Israel does and what it is. They just know that their class interests align with it.
So whether the Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence and British intelligence knew about this Hamas attack, or this however you want to frame it, it served the Zionist agenda, because now, as always, they're the victims, backed by the largest military superpowers, to quote Dr. Martin Luther King, the greatest purveyors of violence in the history of the world, the U.S. government. To frame the Israelis somehow as the victim is ridiculous. It would not be a conspiracy theory to think, because there's proof. The Egyptians said the day after the attacks on August 7th, the Egyptians said, we sent out intelligence that this was in motion. So at the very summits of the Mossad, of Israeli intelligence, one of the most well-trained and well-funded intelligence agencies in the world, if they went like this, that would surely then justify this onslaught of violence. So either way, there's no smoking gun yet to prove it. Either way, it would begin to rationalize and justify in a Zionist public's mind everything that's happening so far.
Danny, I think what you said about framing is really important, that we can't let them frame the issue or define the parameters of the argument. And I think it's like you just got to cut them off at the knees. Well, doesn't Israel have a right to defend itself? No. The Palestinians under international humanitarian law have that right. The oppressors do not. You have to learn how they use the same talking points, and you just, stop them dead. I did a meme on my page where I said, the Palestinian question is not complicated. No, it's not. It's a country with a people stolen by a people without a conscience. And you just boil it down to the simplicities, and you don't let them, as I said, make the parameters for the argument.
Yeah, show them the shrinking map of Palestine. I'm not going to get to the hands yet. Let me finish up. Give me another 5 minutes ish, and then everyone, raise your hands, and we'll go from there. One of the Iranian headlines today, because yesterday imperialism, a white supremacist system, sold us one of the most unbelievable lies. Of course, anyone with anti-imperialist training can remember all of the lies, because in 1991, when they began to bombs away against the Iraqi people, they said that Saddam Hussein's troops went into Kuwait, took all the little babies off incubators, threw the babies on the ground. Anyone who's got a few years on them will remember this. So they have to come up with these incredibly fantastic, wild stories. With Gaddafi in Libya in 2011, it was that Gaddafi would give Viagra to all of his soldiers so his soldiers could go out. Now this is the richest country in Africa, a country in Africa when you got married as part of your social and economic rights, you and your husband received $50,000 from the Libyan government. So there were many social and economic rights in Libya, precisely why the US and imperialism sought to destroy Libya. But all these lies confuse the US public. This is called beating the drums of war. And to say that the Palestinians themselves bombed their own hospital would be the equivalent of saying that George Floyd sat on his own neck and with his own knees for over 9 minutes and tortured and executed himself in May of 2020. It would be the equivalent of saying that the Vietnamese dropped 6 million tons of napalm bombs and chemical agents on themselves from 1962 to 1975. The Iranians today, in response to this bogus genocidal Western propaganda, said yes, because a dinosaur can give birth to a fly. You know, how that is translated from Persian to English, I don't know, but it sounded pretty interesting when I read that, the Iranian perspective. I think we can expect, you know, I don't want to be the doomsday guy, but we do have to claim no easy victories and tell no lies to the people in the spirit of Amilcar Cabral, Cape Verdean Guinean leader of the independence movements there in the 1970s. I think we're going to see an uptick in random hate crimes, because the general equation is the onslaught of racist, Islamophobic, xenophobic rhetoric coming from Breitbart and CNN and Fox, the full media gamut. Of course, the right wing is even worse. Then all of the isolation and mental illness that we suffer in our society, put those two together and forget about it. And that's what we saw in Chicago the other night. A landlord who goes and murders a 6-year-old little Palestinian boy. I mean, this stuff is mind-boggling. But you're also going to see, and this is the hesitancy of the IDF forces, I think there's many different factors, but when the IDF goes into Gaza, every single Palestinian automatically becomes a resistance fighter and someone who has to exercise self-defense. I mean, young children as young as 8, 9, 10, or 11 will have to defend themselves. So maybe they're trying to starve the people forth more to further cripple them before they go in. Let me see if there's any last points that I want to make in the intro. I mean, the Russians could basically care less. They have their own oligarchs, and Putin is a spokesperson for those oligarchs. Now, to the extent that the Russians support a Venezuela and a Cuba through trade and diplomacy, that's clearly a very good thing, so that those revolutionary systems, those worker states, those progressive systems can somehow maneuver and breathe beyond airtight U.S. blockades. But the Russians are just celebrating because they think that finally the U.S. will pivot towards the Middle East and they'll finally abandon this clown that some people call Zelensky. China and Russia have both spoken out diplomatically and at the UN. Clearly, as Susan was indicating, the U.S. has never respected the Geneva Conventions. They'll use it, they'll weaponize it whenever they're engaged in a war against their enemy, but they themselves have never respected any of those. And then finally, I think the general thesis that we have to always come back to, U.S. militarism, the U.S. capitalist system needs enemies to wage its wars. It needs boogeymen. That's why Hamas, Hezbollah, equating an entire people with these different organizations. And who are we to judge what tactics they use? In the words of Dr. Huey P. Newton, the founder of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, after the assassination of Malcolm X in 1965, he wrote a pamphlet that all of us should study called In Defense of Self-Defense. The oppressor has no rights that the oppressed are bound to respect. So U.S. militarism needed its next war. Look at the Dow Jones. As soon as stuff popped off with what, from a Palestinian perspective, was breaking through the wall, breaking through apartheid, going back to claim, of course, from the Zionist perspective, they described it in their terms, but from the perspective of a people who've been confined to a ghetto, who've been ghettoized, who've been stuffed into an apartheid system, who've been partially starved, who snipers, They've had, they talk about the Palestinians are violent. They've had civil disobedience. They've had walks for the Great Return. They've had walks protesting this vile wall of apartheid, and no one ever looked, and no one ever cared. So it was entrapment. It was an entrapment of sorts. But from the U.S. perspective, the U.S. capitalist economy needs wars like our human lungs need oxygen. So in many ways, this was predictable. They were preparing potentially for another war over Taiwan, trying to use one of China's provinces. Of course, they tell us every day that China usurped its own land because Palestinians kill themselves and China usurps its own seas and land. You see where we're going? And when you begin to have these conversations with your neighbors, with your coworkers on social media, people who are open-minded, people who have any inkling of anti-imperialism will begin to go like this. Someone who's been brainwashed by white supremacy, by Zionism, by U.S. exceptionalism, by U.S. Manifest Destiny 2023, before we talked about the Monroe Doctrine in 1823. Today, we have a Biden doctrine that doesn't look any different. So that's just a kind of a political overview. I can respond to any questions that have come up. Then we'll communicate with Isabel if we want a little bit of, breathing together, check-in type of thing, or we can plunge deep into the historical study, or we can go into organizing. So we kind of have, keep that in mind. And maybe when you ask your questions or make your comments, we can decide what is the most efficient way right now to use our time in the service of the struggle. Right now is not that we're gonna, win the Palestinian revolution in the upcoming days and months. Right now, it's a struggle to stop a genocide. And that's why this was called Educate Against Genocide. So again, the dialectical relationship between reformist demands or the immediacy of the moment and the long-term goals of a people's liberation.
Just a quick question. I don't know if this has a lot to do with if maybe you'd want to go into this at all, but I'm just curious about like the double standard with Ukraine, who's fighting for their own independence and all that stuff. And it's like how this is somehow not comparable whatsoever. Is that something maybe you could speak on? I'm just curious. Does it have to do with a similar idea to what you were saying about the West having like stooges out near Russia? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm just curious.
Before we respond to anything, why doesn't everybody, speak and ask their questions? But let's not get into a polemic yet or a debate. Everyone speaks, and then we'll respond.
One thing I'm sorry, Noah. Go ahead.
No, I'll be very quick, sister. Don't worry. I just want to say if anyone knows me, I wake up at 4 a.m. So it's way long past my bedtime right now. I'm so honored I got to be here with all y'all, though. Thank you all so much for everything. I want to just say one thing before I go, that Danny was right, that the short and long term have a relationship between each other. So do the international and national. That's how these things work. When we're thinking about the struggle of the Palestinian people, we're morally outraged. Of course we are. It's morally repugnant what's happening. But their struggle is not just something we are sympathetic to. Their struggle is our struggle because their enemy is our enemy. The same forces that are starving them right now are the ones stealing money from us in order to get the everything, the commodities that do that, all the weapons and infrastructure, etc. That's taken directly from your pockets and mine. The same forces making our lives slowly unlivable now are making their lives quickly unlivable now. And so when we think about this, their fight is not just one that we want to align ourselves with, but that very literally is the exact same fight we are in here. And the best way to help is to win political power here, to organize in a concrete way here, to educate each other here. What we're doing right now, think about this in a party with real seats in the bourgeois legislature. Think about this with the power to shut down the weapons manufacturers, even their distribution. Think about all of that and think about concrete solutions where we can genuinely contribute to our common cause and our common struggle. With that, thank you so much for asking me to come
Get
here
some
tonight,
rest,
Danny.
comrade. Thank you. Get some rest.
I'm gonna be here as much as I can. I love you all. Have a great night.
Great.
Good night.
Night. I think Sam was up, and then whoever else wants to speak.
Oh, like earlier, I was just a way that made sense for me early on when I was learning is when I was talking with other Palestinians, they said that they recommended that I read a Jewish state. It's the defining, the manifesto of Zionism. It was written in 1896 when Hitler was just a few years old. So, these types of things are a lot older than we think. And I'm only just now getting around to reading the literature, but it's the final solution to the Jewish question before any type of Hitlerite final solution that came about many years later. Um, and it's in answering that question that Palestine had to be ethnically cleansed of its Arab population. But what really stuck with me is, I think, in talking about rejecting how it's labeled as the Hamas-Israel war. Like, it's the continuation of the Palestinian war for national liberation. I think it's important for us to stress just in how we speak about these things, because when we talk about what Libyan revolution happened, that was not a Libyan revolution. That was a NATO war of destruction of Libya, but they get away with framing things like this. So I just want to stress that when we talk about this, to not say things like the Israel-Hamas war. And I even see the Israel-Gaza war, which is quite fitting describing the events, because it's not being focused on the West Bank, but people are still being killed in the West Bank too. In fact, it's actually increasing because people's eyes are kind of drawn elsewhere. So I just would like to say that we should emphasize that in our language in class, that this is the Palestinian war for national liberation, not the Israel-Hamas war. Because again, I still get kind of peeved when people go on about Hamas, because there's so many different groups that are fighting this thing. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine being one of them. That's a Marxist-Leninist group. Their literature, the Strategy for the Liberation of Palestine, I would like to do a reading group with y'all on that, because this literature is really important stuff. Theory becomes, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it's, theory becomes a material force when it's gripped by enough masses. Yeah. So whether or not you want to say the Zionists constitute the masses, they got their state. The theory became a material force. And so it's incumbent upon us to make our theory of national liberation a material force. So that's just what I'd like to emphasize about. Thank you.
Floor is open. Questions, comments, or I can respond to, I'll respond to Zena's question after. Okay, go ahead, Ana Maria.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear what Sam is saying, and I'm not trying to be like argumentative or play semantics, but I don't know. I think it's just confusing for me. Or so I know Hamas, attacked, is, I guess, I don't know, settlers, or I'm still need to read exactly what went down. But are you, just to clarify, are you saying so like that attack was them in their war for liberation? Because I don't know, I don't know if Hamas does speak for all of Palestine or all Palestinians, but I do think that absolutely I like what you said about the state. That's so important, is like, and obviously Palestinians are like the ones we should be listening to, and the ones leading their own struggle for liberation and I guess for statehood. And I don't see any of that necessarily out there, like in just from activists. I mean, I'm not seeing it as much, and so I agree that should be part of the discourse. But I would argue too, like, if people don't necessarily want to say what you said, it's a genocide of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people deserve statehood. I don't know. I just got a little bit stuck with what you said, but
All right, I'll definitely respond to that. Anybody else before I?
Yeah, from my personal perspective, I refuse to be put in the position that I condemn Hamas. I don't let myself get backed into that corner. The focus is on what's been done to Palestine for decades, and these are people who were breaking out of a concentration camp. So I do not think that we should be condemning Hamas. That's just my particular take.
Yeah. All right, I don't see any other hands, so we'll start there. You know, try to use a historical parallel, and none of these historical comparisons are perfect, but if you heard about Jewish prisoners of war breaking out of the Warsaw Ghetto and attacking the Nazis and the Nazi supporters, you would cheer. You would say that was the greatest event in human history, and you would make a T-shirt and you would name your grandchildren after those freedom fighters. So even when we don't mean to internalize Western thinking and white privilege and all of these things, you know, we weren't born and raised in socialist Saturn. We were born and raised right here, subjected to the barrage of ideological and a specific ideological regime. Every reporter is going to try to trap you with that one. So that's anti-imperialist training 101. This played out at one of our rallies, I believe it was last Friday. An older gentleman was asked by Fox News, very predictably. Many of you, this went viral. Many of you saw this. Old school dude, Fox News. You know what Fox News is going to ask. Reuters asked me the exact same thing in front of the United Nations. So that means you condone Hamas. Well, do you condone 75 years of occupation and Zionist terrorism? We are asking you, do you condone Hamas? Do you condone ethnic cleansing? I'm asking you if you, so it's not that we have to condone anything. Our job as anti-imperialists is to contextualize. Now, somebody wrote in the comments there, you know, as far as I'm concerned, they're heroes and this and that. Just be careful with that, because that's the type of thing they'll try to use against us and the type of thing they have used against us. Every word that we use here, every word that we use in our text, in our email group, it's all public. It's all, you know, just I'm not trying to increase paranoia, but let's just be strategic. In terms of the sister's question on Ukraine, my goodness, yes, double standard much, hypocrisy much. Noam Chomsky, a scholar who is worth reading. Not that I'm a Chomskyist, but you know, I would certainly disagree with some things. But in terms of his appraisal of U.S. foreign policy, he's been a very important intellectual for decades and decades now. And he talks a lot about worthy victims and unworthy victims. The Zionists can kill at will. They can bomb hospitals. They have a carte blanche to continue their Zionist expansion because that means U.S. militarism can expand. But one thing to tuck away in the back of your minds, U.S. unipolarity is the protective godfather of Zionism. And anyone who's been in these different intellectual anti-imperialist spaces, you've heard over and over, U.S. unipolarity, the rise of multipolarity. And when the big bad bully, the United States, the greatest purveyor of violence in the history of the world, is no longer invincible, and we truly live in a multipolar world, they could never get away with this. So this is a sign that multipolarity is emerging, but it's still, in a sense, a distant dream, because we haven't seen any multipolar forces sweep in order to be in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Who could be more alone right now than the Palestinian people? What support do they have? There's 20 aid trucks at the Rafah border crossing. You're talking about 2.4 million people. There's been no serious demographic study of the total casualties, of the total injuries, of the dead. All these numbers from Democracy Now! And saying, 3,800 casualties, that's ridiculous. What elderly person, what child at this point could still be surviving? What about all the people trapped under the rubble? So I think any serious demographic study would probably put the casualties 5 to 10 times higher. Circling back to Ukraine, what's been happening in Ukraine since 2014, when John McCain and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama championed this cause in Kiev, it was a coup. It was a coup against Yanukovych. Yanukovych was the Russia-leaning, democratically elected president of Ukraine. They orchestrated a coup. They worked with the right wing. They called it this maiden, quote unquote, revolution. It wasn't a revolution. It was a counter-revolution. So they forced the Russian hand, the same thing that they forced in Palestine. So then when the Russians respond to a coup on their doorstep, the idea that NATO was going to expand into Ukraine, NATO had already expanded into Latvia, into Lithuania, into Estonia, into Poland. So Russia is surrounded by enemy bases, NATO bases, US bases. Now they do it with their biggest neighbor, Ukraine, unless Kazakhstan is bigger geographically. I'd have to double check. And the Russians said no. So it's never been a Russia-Ukraine war. It's been a US, NATO proxy war against Russia with the Ukrainian people trapped in the middle. I mean, how different does it sound when we frame it through a historical lens? So I'll just say one thing about the West Bank. The West Bank's about 3 million Palestinians. They're cut off from their sisters and brothers in Gaza. Gaza was a city historically and a province in the south of Palestine. This is a direct provocation of the West Bank as well. It now gives the right to the IDF and to the settlers to kill as many Palestinians as they can. Again, they have a carte blanche. At this point, it's over 80 Palestinians murdered in the West Bank. And I think the most atrocious thing is that the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, this puppet, because yes, the people, and one would have to get deep into this, maybe this is some of the reading that we could do, the people didn't want the Palestinian Authority, the PA, Abbas, because they were sellouts. They were the puppets. And right now, the IDF doesn't even have to go into the West Bank because it's the Palestinian Authority that's tear gassing and oppressing their own people, functioning like the Dominican government, like the Haitian government, as colonial puppet forces of empire.
If I'm not mistaken, there have been reports of deaths at the PLO's hands in some cities around the West Bank. So yeah.
PA, the Palestinian.
Sorry, yes, the PA.
Yeah, not the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. We want to study them as well. So I just gave a little nudge to Isabel to see if we do, shake it up a little bit, breathe, whatever that is, some type of transition. We could go straight into the books. I do want to talk about the syllabus for a second. The syllabus is a project in motion. We've been in the streets. The only place to be right now is in the streets. The civil disobedience, the intensity of it is ratcheting up. That's where we need to be. So I'm not going to lie to you all and say that I've had time to assign all the different chapters. Let's go through what I did assign in theory. Not that you all got it in time, but this was how it was supposed to logistically go down. Let's open up the syllabus as we wait for Isabel. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. So this syllabus here, you all have it in the chat, but I'm going to repost it. This is what you received for signing up. If you didn't receive it yet, I'm not the tech person, so you can't be mad at me. I want nothing to do with that. I got enough problems with all this history we want to present. And I can't keep up with the chat too. If I look at the chat, forget about it. I'll be going down all of those different, historical directions. So the syllabus that we've begun to develop here, we're going to have different presenters and guests. You met Sammy, you've met Noah, some of you know Carlos and Eddie. There'll be others as well. It started today. I'll see you again on Tuesday. Now, if there's some massive demonstration and, we have to start at 9, it's that type of dynamic. At this level of class struggle, we have to prioritize, the needs of the moment. So I'm just asking for maximum flexibility in communication. But hopefully we can stick to this 8 to 10 time frame. This idea of humanitarian relief, the U.S., the dictatorship of capital, where's our freedom of speech and all the constitutional rights we're supposed to have, they've criminalized us in the past just for trying to send humanitarian relief to Palestine or Colombia or Haiti. So we're going to do the best we can, but these are also legal questions as well. But of course, the money will be used, whatever we've raised. I mean, $10 is negligible, but at least it's symbolic. But that money has nothing to do, it's not that we're trying to earn a penny off of the class struggle and the anti-imperialist struggle. It's more, think of it more as donation based. Does someone want to read for us the course description? Whoever can start reading it out
I'll
loud.
read it. I'll read.
Right.
Okay. 2.4 million people are facing starvation, dehydration, and an unprecedented bombing assault in the tiny Gaza Strip. Why is the indigenous population facing an extermination campaign? Who are the forces behind this genocidal onslaught? How will we stop them? How are the Palestinian people sorry, I'm losing my place. We are anti-imperialist Jewish sisters and brothers across the world, and an entire movement going to stop this US Zionist genocidal campaign. Reaching back deeper into history, how did we arrive at this moment? What is the chronology of the Palestinian national liberation struggle from 0 AD through the 1880s, 1900, 1916, 1939, 1948 to the present? What is the history of Zionism versus working class, Jewish, Yiddish land history? What is the weaponization of anti-Semitism? How is Zionist historiography a central component of what we are seeing play out?
Thank you. So those are some of the major themes that are going to come up in our 4 classes. And this syllabus is dynamic. If anyone has some other language, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Actually, that could be something you all really help us with. I'm sure, all these different groups, Jewish activists for peace and Jews for economic and racial equality, and all the Palestinian organizations, they probably have a lot of this curriculum, and so let's collectively, mold this and put this together. I do think where I feel we're headed for the second class. For the second class, I would love to cover Revolutionary Yiddish Land, a history of Jewish radicalism. This is a fine, splendid book. I was actually on research in Eastern Europe and Eastern Germany when I discovered this book, and I'm excited to share some of that research. So I'm thinking the readings from next week, some of them will come from here, because we want the Zionists have created all these myths about Jewish history, I mean, what happened to Yiddish? Yiddish was the language of different Jewish communities in Lodz, Poland, in Warsaw, Poland, and what was called the Pale of Settlement, because the Tsar controlled the movement of Jewish people. That's just a little preview into some of that history. If we learn true working class Jewish history, we can combat the Zionist historiography. Does someone want to try to define or explain the word historiography for us?
While someone's thinking about that, can you just post like if there are key chapters, because I don't know if I'll have time to obviously like read the whole book, but like key chapters or excerpts or things that you want us to read from that before Tuesday? Does that make sense?
No, 100%. That's what we're going to do. The expectation is not that you'll read an entire book. Okay. I'm leaning towards yeah, I'll have to go back to it, but probably the introduction. Start with the introduction and we'll go from there. It'll be on the syllabus though. This will all be laid out on the syllabus. So let's go back to the readings for, we didn't define historiography. Did someone want to try to explain historiography for us?
That's the actual writing of history. Like there's the places, people, events, and all the things that happen in time, but the writing of it and constructing it in a historical narrative, that's historiography from my understanding. That was in my History 101 class that I took in college. That is, when I look back on it, it's so bourgeois in its approach. So, but he was a very nice guy. But yeah.
So it was a bourgeois historiography versus a people's historiography. And that was, Howard Zinn and other people's historians, Eduardo Galeano and Dr. Walter Rodney. They're writing people-centered history. We're interested in people-centered history. We're not interested in bourgeois history where they say that George Washington did this and Abraham Lincoln didn't free nobody. Because you can't, take it from a recovering addict. No one ever freed me. It was a question of when could I free myself. Historiography, then, we want to look at the competing historiographies and try to dismantle a lot of the Zionist historiography by learning the true history. So let's look at the readings for today. Back to the syllabus. The learning outcomes, Isabel's not on yet, is she? So let's read through the learning outcomes. Someone that hasn't...
I'm here too, Danny.
Are you there?
Yeah, my bad. I was just getting something.
So what do you all think if we take 5 minutes? Or you all tell me we could do more than 5 minutes. Or is it interrupting our flow? Isabel could come back in 45 minutes. Y'all want to study right now? Y'all want to do 5 minutes?
Like a little minute.
Energy, 1 minute. It's up to you all. How y'all feeling?
Breathing would be good. Thank you.
Awesome. Little break would be nice.
So this will be our break, breathing. 5 minutes. Is 5 minutes cool for everybody? And Isabel can stay on. Come on. She can introduce herself. All right, let's start with 5 minutes and we'll take it from there.
Cool. First, yes, do we want to do a 2-minute bathroom break or anything, or is everybody okay?
The learning outcomes of this 4-part course.
I can go for it.
Thank you.
Learning outcomes in this course, students will learn to 1, define and use basic terms, concepts, and theories that emerge out of the 75-year Palestinian liberation struggle. 2, gain a clearer sense of how Zionism and its U.S. backers influence the world around us. From the moment we awake in a capitalist society until the moment we rest, we are exposed to thousands of self-deprecating and divisive messages. How is Islamophobia pushing this genocidal campaign forward? Tremendously. 3, identify and analyze the historical causes of a looming genocide. 4, the chief purpose of this course as in any course taught in the spirit of dialectical materialism in Marxism, is to teach dialects so that we can apply such lessons is to teach dialectics so that we can apply such lessons in the day-to-day class struggle in pursuit of state power. 5, discuss and evaluate contemporary topics based on an anti-colonial and Marxist-Leninist historical lens. 6, as things changes, my vision's freaking out, or is the document changing?
I told you, we figuring this out as we go. I just made a few edits. Don't
Oh, it
worry.
is changing. Okay, I was like, wow, I'm tripping right now. Um, 6, yes, initiate, develop, and present independent research addressing and analyzing themes relevant to the themes. Did I read that right?
Themes relevant to the themes. I'm sorry. I'm editing as I go. I apologize.
What are you doing to me, Danny? 7, tie past lessons into our dialectical understanding of current global events. And 8, as of now, reflect on how to take care of ourselves in the midst of a heightened moment of tension and support of Palestine.
Cool.
Cheers.
So the readings, thanks, Sam. Okay, so for today, we got the electronic intifada. We have an assessment of Is This Genocide by Uncivilized Media. And then we have these two texts. So if you go to if you go to this chat, maybe Sam, you can repost them. But if everyone can open up that chapter 20 of this book right here, let's dive in. Yeah, go ahead, Marco.
I think his hand is up from the voting.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry.
All right. And I was going to say this earlier, as a professor, the most beautiful thing is when people have their cameras on. So no pressure, but if at all possible, it would lighten my heart. I begged my college students during the pandemic to turn on their cameras, and I only had moderate success. Chapter 20, Palestine and the U.S. war movement. This 4-part emergency course, it's not taught chronologically. It's a nugget here, it's a nugget here, and then you put them all together. So some of this stuff's going to be brand new. Remember, we're at different places in terms of our relationship to Palestine and what we know and don't know. So this book is wonderful because Palestine, Israel, and the U.S. empire, because it gives chronological history. It looks at, of course, how the U.S. and the British Empire oversaw this white supremacist, Zionist, settler, colonial project and facilitated it through and through. Biden, Anthony Blinken, the British Prime Minister, they've all, in wartime, that was Netanyahu's first words, right? This is war. Wartime. Wartime against who? Against 1.1 million Palestinian children? Wartime against who? They've built up this boogeyman. And the U.S. public, and I think this is where we have to focus some attention perhaps on Tuesday. We can't do everything in one, marathon session. How do we reach liberals? I don't think we're going to reach too many conservatives. If you go through Fox News, I mean, it is. I don't see, much common ground. Of course, we never give up on the masses, but we should try to reach everybody that we can. If we have a coworker that's trumped out or this type of Republican, of course, we should still build with them. But I think there's a real opportunity to tap into some of the humanity within liberals. I was debating with some comrades earlier, like the imperialists, the Zionists specialize in atrocity propaganda. That's a term worth writing down if you're not familiar with it. Atrocity propaganda. If you go on Fox News right now, if you go on CNN right now, And notice how that quote unquote liberal conservative divide, notice how it's always blurred in moments of war and in moments of imperialist US foreign policy. They pretend to be so different, but when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to China, when it comes to Russia, look how similar they are. Arguably why they got rid of Tucker Carlson, but that's an argument for a discussion for another time. So this chapter 20 lays out the relationship of the anti-war movement in this country. The anti-war movement is not the anti-imperialist movement. Every movement, every government, every historical moment, the French Revolution, the Paris Commune, the Haitian Revolution, every movement, every revolution is always going to have a left wing, a center, and a right wing. The anti-war movement is so different. I remember times in 2003, in 2005, we marched in DC against the neoconservatives and Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld and the horrific reinvasion, reoccupation of Iraq. And of course, when we took the stage, when we marched with Palestinian flags, because to fight against a war in Iraq is also to fight for the Palestinian people. It's all interconnected. But a certain swath or a certain part of this anti-war movement said, well, we agree with the part about Iraq, but we don't agree about Palestine ever being mentioned. And that was one of the principal reasons, because we can talk about unity all day. But the moment someone refuses to embrace the demands of Palestinian liberation, do you want to unite with them? Do you have your own program? Do you have your own marches? These are deep discussions that played out in the anti-war movement, not just in 2003. They've always played out. So in those years, the anti-war movement was divided almost right down the middle. It became so ridiculous that I remember marches in 2003 when our people went up, we had the Palestinian flag. And when the next group came up, first we had to remove the Palestinian flag so that they could speak. Just so you understand how Zionism has even infiltrated the left. So if someone can start reading for us the title and the first few paragraphs.
Yeah, I can read it. Palestine and the U.S. anti-war movement. There is a global movement in solidarity with the Palestinian people's struggle. For decades, left groups in countries throughout the world have organized mass actions. The movement started in response to the Palestinian resistance movement in the Middle East. It has only grown and intensified over the years. In the United States, the issue of Palestine has caused undue controversy on the left, especially in the mass anti-war movement. Some forces have deliberately sidelined the issue, thereby bowing to Zionism and racism and tacitly supporting the official U.S. government line on the issue. Other organizations allied with Palestinian and Arab American groups have consistently pushed Palestine to the forefront of the movement. These groups have demonstrated that the issue of Palestine is inextricably linked to the struggle against imperialism in the Middle East.
If you're a highlighter or an underliner, that last sentence there, these groups have demonstrated that the issue of Palestine is inextricably linked to the struggle against imperialism in the Middle East. Go ahead, Wissam, you can keep going.
Progressives in the United States have a special duty to raise the issue of Palestine and demand self-determination, justice, and the right of return for Palestinians. The U.S. government has provided hundreds of billions of dollars to prop up the Israeli state. Israel is its watchdog in the region. Washington has done nothing but wage wars and support proxy wars against the people of the Middle East. One of its main stumbling blocks to regional domination is the Palestinian struggle. Putting the issue of Palestine in its correct place in the movement against U.S. imperialism has been a fierce struggle. It is worth recounting how far we have come. The mass anti-war movement in the 1960s and 1970s did not embrace the Palestinian issue. Organizations in the United States, mainly revolutionary Marxists and leftists in the national liberation movements, championed the cause of Palestinian liberation. It was viewed as part of the worldwide struggle against colonialism and for revolution. But the more liberal sectors of the U.S. movement refused to incorporate it into their agitation and political program. This was displayed shamefully in the early 1980s. On June 12, 1982, more than 1 million people gathered in New York City at the largest rally in U.S. history for nuclear disarmament. The same day marked the start of the second week of Israel's invasion and relentless bombing of Lebanon. As the rally got underway in Central Park, U.S. supplied Israeli warplanes were raining down cluster bombs on the Lebanese and Palestinians in Beirut. But the organizers of the rally, representing the main liberal and pacifist forces in the anti-war movement, banned any mention of the bloodbath unleashed on Lebanon. Why? Because talking about Lebanon at all would have required criticism of Israel's brutal assault. That would have upset the pro-Israeli forces in the peace movement, perhaps to the point of some withdrawing their support.
Thanks. Let's cut it off there to discuss a little bit. And if you notice right underneath, you have this inspiring picture of Palestinian youth fighting. And this book was published 15 years ago. So what we're living right now has repeated itself. It's periodic. It's periodic that we have to come into the streets for Palestine. But as our young sister expressed, Zaina, this is the most intense moment, even for those of us who've been doing this for a long time. I mean, in 1982, I was not there. I was 4 years old. Any questions or comments on this piece? I mean, the more liberal, petty bourgeois, the more privileged layers of society often identify with Israel. A lot of people in New York City have told me I'm crazy for the work that I do because I risk my job and I risk my reputation and I'll lose money. And it takes integrity. It takes a backbone, something that liberals have never had by definition. We can go deeper into that at any point. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Just a point of internationalism. I'm working on a project for the Institute about Grenada, and I learned about those 1982 bombings and United States imperialist actions in Lebanon because of my studies of Grenada. At the time, Ronnie Riggs made a statement about actions happening in Grenada and Lebanon at the same time. So when I was doing research, I'm like, why is he talking about Lebanon? There's a very famous Michael Parenti quote where he says Ronald Reagan won't take yes for an answer. And that's very much the case. So, just in studying the imperialist actions against Grenada, it's all intertwined with imperialism when we study Lebanon and as we study Palestine. So, that was a moment of internationalism for me, my studies. So just wanted to raise that.
And just because Lebanon came up now, this is the authoritative work on Lebanon. It'll be in the syllabus, so you don't have to write it down. But Robert Fisk, a British journalist who lived in Lebanon for decades, Pity the Nation. This is a incredible 700-page work that documents the war in Lebanon that the Zionism in the U.S. provoked and pushed on in a similar fashion to now. That's why the U.S., I mean, tiny Gaza. Gaza is not a threat to, once in a while they get most of them rockets you see in the news, those rockets fall well, like, football fields or miles short of even the settlers. But they use that, of course, to justify. It's always, the way the media wants you to see it is as though history started 2 Saturdays ago. On October 7th, the Israeli people were just so peacefully being Zionist and white and settler. And there's a very common sense question. These people that kind of look like me, how did they end up in the Middle East? How do we explain this? Of course, historically, there were Jewish Arabs, there were Jewish Palestinians, there were Muslim Palestinians, which were the vast majority. In 1900, the demographic studies in Palestine, which at that point was a province of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire throws its lot in with the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and in the Germans in World War I, they lose. By losing, the British sweep in, the French Empire sweeps in, and they divide up the spoils. It's called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. It's signed in Paris or London, and they take red pens and they divvy up the Middle East. Lebanon goes to the French Empire. Syria goes to the French Empire. Palestine becomes what's called the British Mandate. It's at that point of this colonial occupation that the British facilitate the exodus over the course of two decades, hundreds of thousands of Jewish people who are being slaughtered in Europe, nothing to do with Palestine, and they begin to facilitate their migration back to this, So that's why you have these Israelis who look so white, because their grandparents or great-grandparents were born in Warsaw, St. Petersburg. And that's when we'll get into the revolutionary Yiddish land. Ready to keep reading? Who's the next reader?
I can pick up. Where is it? By their disgraceful decision?
Yeah.
I can read if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I don't mind picking up a bit.
Thanks.
I said I was going to read, then I muted myself automatically. Okay, here we go. So by their disgraceful, right? By their disgraceful decision, the June 12th action organizers said, in effect, we protest the threat to the lives of people in the United States posed by a potential future war. We remain silent about those dying in the present war being waged in the United States and in Israel. The June 12th rally was the most egregious example in a pattern of excluding Palestine from the mainstream peace/anti-war movement, a pattern that persisted with the very few exceptions from the time of Vietnam War until the early 2000s. Many of the liberal leaders, and some claiming to be socialists and communists, justified this exclusion on the grounds that support for the Palestinian cause would be divisive and dramatically shrink the turnout for anti-war demonstrations. The same leaders would often explain, while they were, of course, personally supported the Palestinian struggle, the broader movement was not there yet. This type of chauvinist thinking was an attempt to prevent what needed to happen most: have the U.S. movement against war come out decisively for Palestine, countering the official government and corporate media lies. Instead of having 1 million workers and progressives from all backgrounds hear about the criminality of the US-backed Israeli onslaught and the justice of the Arab resistance by their deafening silence, the leaders who supposedly championed peace justified the most aggressively militaristic regimes in the world. But the people in the United States needed to know the truth. They needed to know that everyone who cares about social justice should take up the struggle of the Palestinian people. What finally broke this reprehensible pattern was a struggle in spring 2002 over the April 20 anti-war protests that took place in Washington, D.C. and San Francisco. Two coalitions, the Answer Coalition, Act Now to Stop War and End Racism, and the A20/United We March Coalition, which later that year evolved into United for Peace and Justice, agreed that after considerable negotiations on a joint call for the April 20 demonstrations, opposing the Bush program of war, racism, and poverty. On March 29th, the Israeli government, with the full backing of the Bush administration, launched a massive assault and full reoccupation of the Palestinian cities and refugee camps in the West Bank and Gaza. The Israeli occupation forces rounded up, beat and imprisoned thousands of Palestinian activists, and carried out a massacre and wholesale destruction in the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank. This was at the height of the Al-Aqsa Intifada. The Answer Coalition responded to the offensive by calling for the reorienting of the April 20th demonstrations to protest the US-backed Israeli war on the Palestinians. The A20 coalition opposed this reorientation, resurrecting the old argument that raising the Palestinian struggle would predetermine a small turnout at the protests. In fact, the opposite turned out to be true. On April 20th, 2002, a myth was shattered. More than 100,000 people marched in Washington, the largest anti-war protest since the 1991 Gulf War. It was clear that the majority of demonstrators came because of, if not in spite of, the focus on the Palestinian struggle. Each coalition had its own starting rally before merging together in a joint march. The vast majority of participants that day joined the Answer opening rally, which focused on Palestine. There was an especially strong turnout from the Arab American and Muslim communities. Similar struggles were repeated in the lead-up demonstrations on March 20th, 2004, the first anniversary of the US invasion of Iraq, in September 24th, 2005. Both of these demonstrations were demonstrations that, after considerable struggle, ended up being co-sponsored by UFPJ and Answer. Initially, UFPJ opposed both unity with Answer and the inclusion of any demand related to Palestine. In both 2004 and 2005, campaigns by Answer and Arab American, Muslim, and other organizations prevailed. Unified protests took place with demands calling for an end to the colonial occupation in Palestine as well as in Iraq. On September 24th, 2005, more than 300,000 people marched in Washington. These struggles helped bring an end to the demonization of the Palestinian cause within the anti-war and other progressive movements. When Israel launched its murderous assault on Gaza in late December 2008, tens of thousands of people were in the streets within days. Such a response would have been hard to imagine even a decade earlier. The wave of protests, not only in cities in the Middle East and in Europe, but also in cities and towns throughout the United States, was unprecedented. It showed a growing understanding that many people who seek justice are tied to the Palestinian struggle. Also, growing inside the United States is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement aimed at targeting businesses, schools, and institutions that do business with apartheid Israel, along with the movement for academic and cultural boycott of Israel. Originally called Palestinian organizations, the movement has grown in size and scope, becoming international and a positive component of the overall Palestinian solidarity movement in the United States. In February 2009, Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, divested from more than 200 companies in violation of its socially responsible investment policy. This included divestment from companies involved in the Israeli occupation of Palestine. The campus group Students for Justice in Palestine initiated the review of Hampshire's investments that resulted in divestment. It was the first college or university to take such action.
Beautiful. All right, we read quite a bit there. I'll never forget those days. So it was a Saturday, and we were trying to unite the two anti-war groups because you would never want to have different demonstrations. You want to bring everybody together. So we go in, and there's this big office in DC, and we sit down, and there's these different groups. And, you know, we start off diplomatically and stuff and trying to win over these other groups that they would join us and that they would include Palestine front and center. We're trying to be diplomatic, right? These are the introductions. This dude who used to be in the Young Lords Party, the revolutionary organizations of the 60s and 70s. It's his turn to introduce himself. He slams his fist down. If you don't have the Palestinian flag You might as well be from the KKK and come burn a cross on my lawn. And that set the tone, you know, and the meeting did not continue. People started walking out, so we couldn't unite the two rallies. So why would some people not include Palestine as a demand? People can be selective in their outrage. You know, someone could be very, very, very progressive and understand this issue so well, but be so bad on this issue. For example, this is kind of a behind the scenes thing. I don't want to be too specific, but there was a pretty amazing show that was canceled a week ago. You all might not even noticed yet. Now everyone's scrambling. What show was it? And I'm not at the leisure of saying, but you'll figure it out within due time, because some of the higher ups who had never interfered in 5, 6, 7 years, they had never interfered with the editorial line of the people doing the show, the hosts, the broadcasters, right? The analysts. But when they wanted to tell the truth about what was happening right now in Gaza, the bigwig, for the first time in 7 years, intervened and said no. And the principled comrade said, yes, we're going to tell the truth. Fired, show's over, taken off the air, 7, 8, 9 years of work gone. Just so you can appreciate the contradictions. I work in a department with 25 professors at one university. On day 3 or 4, I wrote an entire email to my department. We're on day 13. All I received was a public reprimand from my boss. Not one other professor, all of whom are Latina, Latino, Latinx. They're all Latino. Not one said one word. One DM'd me privately to say everything I'm doing is great and everyone believes in me. Oh, thanks so much. But not one person said one word. Just so you understand. And you have to ask yourself at a human level, the demonization, the vilification. The only way they could accuse the Palestinians themselves of blowing up their own hospital is if the US public had been subjected to such a steady, thorough campaign of racism and Islamophobia. Because would they buy the story that the Israelis had blown themselves up? They would immediately say, that's ridiculous. It was the terrorists. It was so all the double standards. And we would love to ask these political officials who would try to worm and squirm their ways out of it because they're professional snakes and they're professional liars and they're professional racists. And they could never give us any type of straight answer. But this is a moment where we can heighten the contradictions. What you have to do in those moments, right? When you catch the imperialists lying so blatantly, you know, screen record, screenshot, whatever it is, and send it to your liberal aunt and your liberal uncle and say, do you really believe this? So be strategic as we try to grow this movement. So we're at 11 o'clock. You know, I'm willing to go until midnight strong, but there's no, we've already lost about 8 people, I assume, because of time. So we can cut it off officially here. We can go for 15 more minutes, 30 more minutes. We can cut it off and then just more informally stay on. I'm following you all's lead, but I want to make a group decision. Because if people are just going to trickle, then let's just say we'll all stay for 20 more minutes and then whoever has to leave leaves. And how are you all feeling? What's the proposal?
Personally, I'm good till midnight too. I don't have anything, but if people want to go as well, I'm okay with having like informal talks or just, again, like questions, just fielding questions and stuff like that. Because I have questions, but I'm cool with anything.
I agree.
All right. So let's say we go officially till 11:30, and at 11:30 we cut the recording, and then whoever wants to stay on. So Ruby agrees. I'm just gonna use the bathroom quick. But do y'all want to keep reading as I use the bathroom, or do y'all want to wait for me? Does everyone need a 2-minute break? It's up to you.
I need a break.
All right, so yeah, 3-4 minute break. Okay, see y'all in a few. So we'll cut the recording again, or Daniel will know. So let's transition to this book, Beyond Chutzpah. I'm drawing a blank. I think Chutzpah is the Hebrew word for cheer. Is that correct? Or like a Jewish spirit of happiness? Is that correct? Or someone can look it up. Anyone remember? Who's looking it up?
Audacity. Unmitigated gall.
Yes.
I've heard the phrase like he's got a lot of chutzpah, or like, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Chutzpah. You gotta spit it out.
Is that Hebrew or Yiddish? Hebrew,
Yiddish.
Right?
Yiddish.
Yiddish?
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna use it all the time now. I'm trying to bring Yiddish back. And that's what we're gonna talk about, I think, next week. Don't hold me to that, because again, it's flexible, but I had planned with we were gonna do, before this broke out, conflict. You notice how the US media, the corporate media, the Middle East conflict, and whenever there's casualties, they love to just lump them in, as if they have to lump them in, because if they see that historically, and as I say some of these things, it breaks my heart. I don't mean to be so blunt, but I can only teach about this history in a truthful way. My professor in 2005 for modern Middle Eastern history, Professor Rashid Khalidi, who I highly recommend you read his work. He's on democracy now quite a bit. He put together all the studies, and whenever there's these conflicts, the average disproportionate casualties, if there's one Zionist death, it's usually anywhere between 8 to 20, if not higher, Palestinian deaths. That's why the media will always say the Middle Eastern conflict plays out. Today, there were 17 deaths. Yeah, 17 Palestinian deaths. But if you actually tell the truth.
Sorry, Danny, just really quick. That's exactly what happened right before President Biden addressed the nation today. I forget what channel it was. I was just watching it live on YouTube, but they were saying it's been like 5,000 deaths. It's like, yeah, but that's like, how much of that is the Palestinians versus the Israelis? Like, it's so convenient that they can just rope it all together and just say 5,000 deaths in total and not tell you like who's what.
Yeah, and as Weesam's pointing out, in the different conflicts, it's even more extreme. I mean, right now it's getting very, very extreme. So if you've gotten a lot of threats in these days, you can empathize a bit with the good Dr. Finkelstein, who's, well, yeah, let's show Sam. I think Sam was the one who posted it earlier or put it somewhere. Can we show the clip of the famous clip of Dr. Finkelstein? I'll contextualize it. I'll make Sam a co-host. I think you were the one that
yeah, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
I just gotta say though, that clip that got posted of you speaking the other day, where you scream, every liberal politician who stayed quiet, we see you. I got chills, man. Like you were channeling an energy that's internationally felt. So I just wanted to say that what those words meant a lot to me. Yeah, you want me to share my screen?
Did anyone see the clip from Chicago of the the Chicago town council meeting that they had a resolution to stand with Israel, and a Black filmmaker got up and spoke for about 10 minutes, and it was just amazing.
Yeah, maybe share that. Share that to the chat.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it. He talked about how Black people in Chicago have much more in common with the Palestinians than with the Zionists.
Woo. That's a revolutionary. If you can post that.
Yeah, I'm going to look for it.
I'd love to share it on social media.
Are y'all able to see this? Is this
Yes.
showing up on the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to play a few seconds and let me know if it's heard.
In 1948, the UN approved the partition of the State of Israel into a Jewish state and an Arab state. Jordan.
Can y'all hear that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure. All right, let's go for it.
Jordan to the west and Egypt to the south.
It stopped.
Finkelstein. In 1948, the UN approved the partition of the State of Israel into a Jewish state and an Arab state. Jordan to the west and Egypt to the south had both previously been created and attacked first upon the creation of the State of Israel. Egypt and Jordan had the opportunity between 1948 and 1967 to create a Palestinian state. Why was there not the same response when the region was under Jordanian and Egyptian control?
You know, I want to just say, young men, I'm not in any way trying to be insulting. I'm way past that. I want to end the conflict, and I want to be reasonable. But it does trouble me, and I want you to think about it. You come here with canned questions. I gave a lecture, I spoke for around an hour, and there was a large amount of material in what I had to say. You don't even listen. You just come in here with a prepared question that has nothing whatsoever to do with what I was speaking about. It's as if I were giving a lecture on particle physics and you were coming here and talking about botany. You don't even listen. You really have to, in my opinion, open your mind and listen. You're not looking at an enemy here. And you shouldn't come in my opinion, you shouldn't come in with these canned questions which Hillel gives you or some other organization to prepare you. Listen and think for yourself. And then I think we can make some progress. Think for yourself, where was I unreasonable? What statement of mine was factually untrue? What did I misrepresent? How did I try to pull the wool over the eyes of the audience? I could sit down here now and speak to you at great length about what happened in 1947 and thereafter. But I didn't provide any background material to give an answer to a question like that. I didn't lecture on the topic. It's absolutely meaningless now for me to answer that question. Most people in the room don't even know what you're referring to. I don't understand how you engage in a dialogue that way. Do you want me to start telling you that in 1947, Israel had already struck a deal with Jordan to absorb the West Bank? Do you want me to tell you that Egypt never annexed Gaza, Egypt never annexed Gaza, that between 1947 and 1967, the position of the Arab world was still to restore the rights of the Palestinians to the whole of Palestine? After 1967, when that became an unrealistic demand, the Arab leagues, or the Arab countries, beginning in the early 1970s, then in concert with the entire international community, came to accept the two-state settlement. And that's the genesis of what we have now today. I could go through the whole history. With all due respect, from well before you were born, I was reading about it. And the number of books I read, sometimes I think could fill this whole room. It's actually rather depressing. The world is a very big place, and my entire adult life was devoted to learning about one tiny corner of it. But I don't see the purpose of doing that now. First of all, I doubt you even know the scholarly literature on the topic. It's easy for me to make rings around you. I can cite 1,000 different resources. I can make you look foolish. I don't see the point of it. Why don't you listen to what I have to say and answer.
All right, let's cut it there.
Very pertinent question.
Woo. Wow. Yeah, Finkelstein is fire. He's somebody we really want to study. Maybe we can end with, is that the same clip where he goes off on the misuse of anti-Semitism? That's the most famous clip, when the girl's crying and saying, "How can
Oh
you?"
yeah, no, I got you. Just give me a sec. I can pull it.
No,
Yeah.
no hurry, no hurry. Maybe we'll come back to that, but let's open up the text. Yeah, crocodile tears, fake tears, exactly. So beyond Chutzpah, on the misuse of anti-Semitism and the abuse of history. And Finkelstein had written an earlier book called The Holocaust Industry. In other words, taking advantage of this horrific history to try to present yourself as a victim today, when you're enacting some of the same brutality, ethnic cleansing. Unfortunately, I do not think, and this is not to try to open up a debate, but I don't think a lot of the comparisons are overdrawn. Though, you know, we do have to be careful if we put like the Israeli flag next to a swastika. I mean, that's a sure way that they can take a screenshot of you and try to get you fired. So just be strategic with what you share publicly. The introduction, page 1. So we're going to read a few different sections, but I'm going to first just kind of tease out the most important points that he makes. So he begins by critiquing this time immemorial argument. You're going to hear this all the time. That's why I went back to 0 AD on the syllabus. The historiography, the faux history, the fake history, the invented history of the Zionists is that Muslims and Jews have been arguing forever over this land and they can never get along. But that's a lie. This really began in 1947 and in 1948. The first ever Zionists to arrive were in 1880, but they were like minimal. They were like a few families, a few intellectuals, but they had this vision already that this is our land, but they didn't have entire empires behind them. So they arrived and they settled and they had their little Zionist sect, and no one cared because they weren't murdering people. And in 1900, this is what I taught on last week. In 1900, the population of Palestine under the Ottoman Empire was roughly 82, 83% Muslim Palestinians, and then 8 to 10% Christian and 8 to 10% Jewish Palestinians. And it wasn't a big deal, and there wasn't a religious conflict. There's a great French documentary called Palestine, The Story of a Land. I watched it in undergrad, so some 26 years ago. It's a wonderful documentary. Of course, it's like impossible to get. It's one of them documentaries where you have to pay like $800 to access it or something. But if somebody can find Palestine, The Story of a Land, it would be very good. So Dr. Finkelstein debunks all of the myths from time immemorial, the origins of the Arab-Jewish conflict over Palestine by Joan Peters. He explains that actually, no, on page 2, it's an uncomplicated conflict. He talks about the ethnic cleansing in 1948. You know how the other day they said that they announced that all Palestinians had to go to the southern half of Gaza. Remember, Gaza is tiny. I mean, let's go to the map for a second. I told you the DVD is $400. I've been trying to get a hold of it for years. I don't make these things up. If it was a Zionist documentary, it would be free and it'd be mailed to all of us, I'm sure. So here is the land where we're talking about. I mean, here's Gaza. This is the threat to U.S. empire. This is the threat to one of the most powerful militaries in the world. There's all this aid right here. My prediction is that Biden will be, quote unquote, to the center of the Zionists, and Biden, Justin Trudeau has been a little bit to the center of Biden, the Canadians. They're going to try to let in a trickle at the Rafah border crossing of this aid. You're talking about 2.4 million people. A trickle of aid is not going to make any difference. This situation is more dire than ever. Back to the book here. Back in 48, what they did was there's a sentence on page 3 at the very top as part of the Zionist mythology. Thus, it was now conceded by all serious scholars that the Arab radio broadcasts were a Zionist fabrication and that the Palestinians had been ethnically cleansed in 1948. So every time the Zionists murder and displace, like any U.S. president when there's a war, they're not going to tell the truth. Imagine if a U.S. president had a press conference. Imagine if Obama said, fellow Americans, I can't do an Obama impersonation. I'm not Key and Peele. But imagine if Obama has a press conference and says, we're going to overthrow the president, Manuel Zelaya of Honduras. This is in 2009, because he is left-leaning and we need a puppet that we can control. How many young people in the U.S. would sign up for the U.S. military if a president told the truth? So the president gives the press conference like the one you all just referred to with Biden, where he says, we need to bring democracy, and you can predict word for word what they're going to say. This book then reveals the true history of this, of these massacres, of these slaughters that were called Al-Aqba, the brutal repression. So the sections that I want to read here, let's go to page 5 where it says, yet if. Who can read for us at the top? Yet if.
What page?
Introduction, page 5. If you do Control F, yet if should come up.
I've got it, if that's all right.
Great.
Yet if, as I've suggested, broad agreement has been reached on the factual record, an obvious anomaly arises. What accounts for the impassioned controversy that still swirls around Israel-Palestine conflict? To my mind, explaining this apparent paradox requires, first of all, that a fundamental distinction be made between those controversies that are real and those that are contrived. To illustrate the real differences of opinion, let us consider again the Palestinian refugee question. Is it possible for an interested parties to agree on the facts yet come to a diametrically opposed moral, legal, and political conclusions? Thus, as already mentioned, the scholarly consensus is that Palestinians were ethnically cleansed in 1948. Israel's leading historians on the topic, Benny Morris, although having done more than anyone else to clarify exactly what happened, nonetheless concludes that morally it was a good thing, just as, in his view, the annihilation of Native Americans was a good thing, that legally Palestinians have no right to return to their homes, and that politically Israel's big error in 1948 was that it hadn't carried out a large expulsion and cleansed the whole country, the whole land of Israel, as far as the Jordan, of Palestinians. However, repellent morally, these clearly can't be called false conclusions. Returning to the universe inhabited by normal human beings, it's possible for people to occur on the facts as well as on their moral and legal implications, yet still reach divergent political conclusions. Noam Chomsky agrees that factually Palestinians were expelled, that morally this was a major crime, and that legally Palestinians have a right to return.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We can cut there for a second. So Benny Morris was one of these Zionist historiographers, and they just started inventing things. And for years, you know, I've had these moments of encounter, and what the Zionists will always tell you, oh, it wasn't our fault. The Palestinian leaders sold out their people, and the Palestinians did this, and the Arab radios told them to do this. They invent the most whimsical lies, and you're like, wait, what? And it's always important, I think, to come back to that comparison of what happened to Native American people. That's how I explain it to my family. I've been working on a template because I wrote a letter to I've written, I think, 2 letters to my families, which I've never done in my life. I lived through every U.S. invasion of Panama, the first war of aggression against Iraq and Afghanistan, and the dirty war against Syria. I've never written my family. To again, you know, give you a sense of how dire and grave this, same with the professors on the listserv. And I told them, I said, if this was about a war, if this was about politics, you think I'd be writing? Y'all have known me for 20 years. So I think we need templates of letters. Like, we can't use radical language. Remember what we said about the sprint, Marxist tactics, revolutionary tactics, being flexible. I was talking about this on the stream the other night because I was like, I know I said this at some point. Right now, we just want our family members to like just win them over to that, the complete annihilation, the genocide, the Holocaust of a people is of course, the West Bank still exists, the diaspora still exists, but what they're doing to Gaza right now is inhuman, and liberals don't want inhuman things. Racists could care less. And we should study the racism that is built into Zionism. I think it was the president, it wasn't Netanyahu, but it was one of the chief Zionist leaders. They actually posted the other day, they said, we are the children of light and they are the children of the darkness. We are the law of modernity. They're the law of the jungle. I mean, that's their thinking. They are 110% convinced that Palestinians, that Arabs, that natives, that indigenous people represent an inferior form of human being. And sometimes they'll just say it. Most times they hide it. But that's the enemy that we're dealing with. And that's why this enemy, the Zionist enemy, is anti-Jewish as well. I don't know. Somebody just write down in their notes, the Zionist death trap. I want to explain that, but I don't necessarily have to explain it now. The Zionist death trap. So let's do a few more minutes on Finkelstein as we wind down. Page 6 in the introduction, in 1989, if you just hit Command F or Control F, you can find where I'm reading from, because I'm just going to read a few sentences here or there, and I'm going to move pretty quick. There's no substitute for you yourself sitting down with these books. To quote one bibliophile and one of my favorite authors, there is nothing sweeter in life than to sit down with a new, crisp, revolutionary book and dive in. And I would concur with that revolutionary leader, whose name I shall reveal one day. Page 6, a 1989 General Assembly resolution, so this is the United Nations, question of Palestine, effectively calling for a 2-state settlement in the withdrawal of Israel from the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, passed 151-3, the only dissenting vote, apart from those of the U.S. and Israel, being cast by the island state of an island you never heard of. The United Nations, similar to the blockade against the 11 million people of Cuba, every year, over and over, the United Nations, 100 in 51 countries to 3 repudiates what Israel is doing, yet nothing changes. Every day the UN gives press conferences right now. There's a dire situation. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. The UN is a fig leaf. It's a disguise for the United States and the other imperial powers. I have an entire PowerPoint presentation called F the UN if we ever decide to go that route, but a little bit more than we can chew off now. Whenever I show all my PowerPoints to my students, just because the F word is in there, they always choose that one. On page 8, it goes back to all of the propaganda from the Zionist historiography. On page 8, they always wanted to present the Arabs, the native people, the Palestinians, as backward, as Bedouins who had no fixed location, anything to justify that somehow this land belonged to them. I think most of you know the ABCs of this history, but if you're just learning this, I cannot imagine what it must be like to hear this for the first time. And when everything popped off, I was scheduled to be on Dominican television, not the Dominica. Dominica was a French colonized island that's tiny, that speaks Creole in the Caribbean, but the Dominican Republic. I was on national television and I said, the only way I'm going to go on national television is if you allow me to speak on the relevant issue, which is Palestine. And I said, my second demand is you have to allow me to be, it was through Zoom or Skype or whatever it was. I need control of screen sharing, because if I can't show the shrinking map of Palestine, if I can't show the historical proof, if I can't show the atrocities of the Zionists, it's just my words. It's all my words. So the interview happened, boom, 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 censored, banned. They never spread it. I was trying to get ahead of the genocidal violence. The answers lie in history. Like normal Finkelstein, when he was getting back at this, immature 20-year-old little bratty Zionist. I mean, who are you arguing with? You want to argue? Who are you arguing with? You can't argue with history. And that's what makes them so cowardly. On page 8, we have the Balfour Declaration. It's important to understand the Balfour Declaration, if not publicly. Can someone read for us on page 9 where it says, if not publicly? Somebody, anybody.
I can do it.
Thank you.
If not publicly, at any rate privately, this is how the British rationalized the Balfour Declaration. For Balfour himself, we deliberately and rightly decline to accept the principle of self-determination for the present inhabitants of Palestine, because the question of the Jews outside Palestine is one of world importance. And Zionism was rooted in age-long traditions, in present needs, in future hopes, of far profounder import than the desires and prejudices of the 700,000 Arabs who now inhabit that ancient land.
So there you go. From the British Empire, they could care less about the native people. They could use this land for their purposes. So Lord Balfour spells that out right there. To quote another racist, sorry to make you do this, but go down to where it says Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was the prime minister at the height of the British Empire at a time when Rudyard Kipling said the sun will never set on the British Empire. Rudyard Kipling, the infamous author of The White Man's Burden. Can you read where it says, and for Winston Churchill?
And for Winston Churchill, testifying before the Peel Commission, the indigenous population had no more right to Palestine than a dog and a manager has the final right to the manager, even though he may lain there for a very long time. And no wrong has been done to these people by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, or at any rate, a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place. The point is not so much.
That's good. That's good. We don't need any more white supremacy for the night. Going to bed is drawing closer. I just wanted you to hear from generation to generation the British imperial thinking. This went along with their needs, with their interests, because for them, this was all their colonies that they wanted to extract from and exploit. On page 14, we have more of the mystifying cliches. Here we have the Native American comparison. Yeah, I think we'll be done in 5 more minutes. So if you can hold strong for 5 minutes, we can end this class and then, informally kick it. I'd love to hear, particularly from the comrade students who I've never met before, your first impressions, how you feel intellectually, emotionally. Did you learn about this when you were in high school? All that type of stuff. So who can read? Well, do you mind? You want to keep reading, Zena, or do you want someone else to read?
I don't mind, but is my fan super loud? Because I don't want that to be annoying.
No.
Okay, good. Okay, where do you want me to read?
The whole long paragraph where it says Benny Morris, although it's on page 14.
Benny Morris, although approving the ethnic cleansing of Palestine and nearly pathological in his hatred of Palestinians, nonetheless anchors Palestinian opposition to Jewish settlement in a perfectly rational, uncomplicated motive. The fear of territorial displacement and dispossession was to be the chief motor of Arab antagonism to Zionism. What's remarkable about this formulation isn't so much about what's said, but rather what's not said. There's no invoking of Arab anti-Semitism, no invoking of Arab fears of modernity, no invoking of cosmic clashes. There's no mention of them because for understanding what happened, there's no need for them. There's no need of them. The obvious explanation also happens to be a sufficient one. Indeed, any comparable instance, the sorts of mystifying cliches commonplace in the Israel-Palestine conflict would be treated rightly with derision. In the course of resisting European encroachment, Native Americans committed many horrendous crimes. But to understand why doesn't require probing the defects of their character or civilization. Criticizing the practice in government documents of reciting Native American atrocities, Helen Hunt Jackson, a principled defender of Native Americans, writing in the late 19th century, observed, "The Indians who committed these atrocities were simply ejected by force, and in the contest arising from the forcible ejectment, killing men who had usurped and stolen their land, what would a community of white men situated precisely as these Cherokees were, have done?"
Good. So there you have, and again, go back to, Nat Turner, go back to the Native Americans, any Maroons, any resistance against settlers, we cheer that on. We all wear that T-shirt, that T-shirt, fighting terrorism since 1942, and it shows 10 indigenous fighters. I mean, we should make the Palestinian version. It's not, defending your land is not terrorism. All right, let's close this chapter out. The next page or so, Theodore Roosevelt as well, and other U.S. Officials, they draw comparisons. This whole manifest destiny, the white man's burden, we're the superior race, all of the racism. He references Alan Dershowitz, one of OJ's lawyers who debated Cornel West on Fox, and to have Cornel West on Fox is, that is good. Fox is the most watched network in America. And then the next chapter the not so new anti-Semitism. He breaks down how the Anti-Defamation League and these different Zionist organizations that masquerade as like legal societies, and they search for anybody doing this type of education, this type of work, this type of marching. And as that movement grows, like the boycott and divestment and sanctions, BDS movement, and then they try to preemptively say, oh, well, Professor Danny Shah is a anti-Semite. And that's what this whole book is about. Divorcing us from the true history of anti-Semitism, which has a long, ugly history. And that's what I think we'll study next week or the week next class or the class after. Anti-Semitism historically was what Trump does today. Scapegoat, the blame game. It's the Mexicans' fault. It's the immigrants' fault. It's the illegals. Dehumanize. There is an incredible history and a genocidal history of anti-Semitism against Jewish populations. But it wasn't coming from Palestine or the Muslim world or the Arab world. It was the czars of Russia. It was the lords of England. It was the feudal kings of Europe in the Middle Ages who used anti-Semitism as an escape valve for the masses. If the masses were angry, the king would feed them some Jews and say, well, it's the Jews' fault. The Jews are the financiers. If there was some type of uprising against a feudal lord locally or at a more national level, the Dreyfus Affair. The Dreyfus Affair was this infamous affair at the start of World War I where a Jewish French military officer was accused of being a stool pigeon, a spy. And that unleashed this horrific violence against all Jewish people in a similar way to today. If one Palestinian does one thing, then all Palestinians are degraded and attacked. So that's the end of our first class, almost 4 hours.